What's a better retirement strategy? Tips or zero coupon bonds? All right, so hopefully you watched the video I did last night about this strategy is guaranteed to beat the 4% rule on zero coupon bonds. So just a real quick reminder what a zero coupon bond is. You're basically saying, okay, I'm going to buy a bond at a discount, a significant discount potentially today. All right, so I'm going to pay $40,000 for a bond today that will be worth $50,000 at some point in the future, or $60,000 or $70,000, whatever it is. I'm going to buy it for a discount. It's a zero coupon bond. Why am I getting it for a discount? Because there's no income. There's no coupon. I don't get any interest off that. Again, I'm buying it for a discount today. I'm paying $40,000 today for something that'll be worth $50,000 in the future. All right, hope that's the basis of a zero coupon bond. There is no interest whatsoever. Now, what happens is there's an assumed interest rate. I mean, I'm putting $40,000 in today, and I'm going to get back $50,000. So I have an internal rate of return at that stage. But you're not getting any cash flow from that at all. So what I did yesterday is I said, let's just ladder a bunch of zero coupon bonds. And we're going to do that with a $50,000, what we need in terms of spending power today, $50,000, all right? We're going to inflate that spending power at 3% a year. So we're going to say we have $50,000 today. If we need $50,000 today, we'll need $50,150 or something like that, $51,050 next year. $53,000 in year two, because $50,000 today is the equivalent of $53,000 in 2 years, something like that. I hope that makes sense. And you keep doing this each and every year. So we're going to buy 30 different zero coupon bonds, and essentially what I said is going to cost us $1.2 million to buy $50,000 today's purchasing power zero coupon bonds. That means every year I get a bond that's maturing for the equivalent of $50,000 today each year for the next 30 years. It's just like a ladder CD scenario, except in this case it's zero coupon bonds. But some of you guys made a good comment. First of all, look, my man Joe Kuhn shows up here. Joe Kuhn's crushing. Joe Kuhn, I remember Joe Kuhn, he had posted on his YouTube channel, on his community page, a picture of he and his wife on a boat while they're both still working, or at least he was still working, I can't remember. And then 2 years later, he posted a picture of he and his wife after he had retired for 2 years. The picture of he and his wife on the boat, they both look like chunky monkeys. The picture of he and his wife after they retired, they both look a lot thinner. Their skin looked better. They just look better. You know what I'm saying? It's weird. I was like, man, so retirement really did Joe right. Anyway, so this is my man here, John Little, because John is little down below. He's Irish. Aren't you, John? You're little down below. And I'm Irish too, so I know it's like. If inflation is a little bit higher, then you need to buy a bigger cash flows in the future, but you can't because you spent all that money or have to sell at a loss. And that's 100% right. And so basically what he's saying is, look, Josh, I appreciate you giving a 3% inflation on this, but if inflation is a 5%, then you're not going to have enough cash when those bonds mature to provide the same level of income. That's 100% correct. And so that's just a fact. So I'm using a 3% basis as inflation, and you want to use some kind of inflation, but what if inflation is higher, then that 3% isn't enough, 100%. And which means if inflation is higher, it's going to cost you more money to buy a bigger bond. But you don't have any more money because it's already been deployed. Another guy had a good comment too. Let me see if I can't find it. This guy, if there is a risk here, which is inflation. If inflation is low, those are great buys. What? Oh boy, doggies. If inflation goes up, those are huge losses. 3% inflation is already baked in, I said. And then he said, planned in, not baked in. Okay, I don't get it. If inflation is generally below 2%, that's much better plan. If inflation is closer to 4%, you did poorly. All right, so, I mean, not a bad point. I'm using a 3% inflation. I don't expect at all a 4% inflation, but who knows, man? I mean, historically, we haven't had that. We've had one period of higher inflation, 66 to 82. You can even say 66 to basically 90. And ever since then, it's been 3% or so, and I'm fully comfortable with that. But the same, that risk goes with everything else as well. Any kind of investment. If there's high inflation, you're in a world of hurt. I don't care if it's stocks or bonds. I don't care what it is. Tips, on the other hand, are different. And that's why I like tips. So let's go into our tip stuff here. So you'll see my Schwab thing here. All right, so we got Schwab. We're going to buy a Treasury Treasury inflation protected security. That's what a tip is. And you can see this right here is trading at $94, all right? And so what it means is you're going to get $100,000 or $100 essentially when this matures in 2029. All right, so it's trading at $94. Let's just for simplicity say you're buying a $100,000 bond. You're going to pay $94,000 for this $100,000 bond. It will mature in 5 years at $100,000. All right. Now it could mature at a higher rate because of inflation. If inflation goes up, the principal on the bond will go up as well. So you don't really know what the maturity is going to be, but we know for a fact it'll be above par. In this case, we're assuming par is $100,000. I hope this is making sense, man. I'm worried it's not because there's a lot of moving parts here. But so we're going to buy a tip. We're going to say we're more worried about inflation being higher than 3%. So again, my zero coupon strategy baked in. I don't know why the guy was like baked in, planned in. What the hell? It's weird. If all the things get wrapped around the axle about it seems weird to me. But whatever. We're using a 3% assumed inflation rate in my zero coupon strategy. If inflation is higher, that won't keep up with inflation. I don't think anyone would deny that. But the alternative would be to buy tips because tips keep up with inflation. Whatever CPI is, tips keep up with it. So if you bought a $100,000 par value bond, that's your face value, say we'd pay $94,000 for it. And that's in 5 years. So we're going to put $94,000 into it. And again, assuming that inflation will just for simplicity, there isn't any inflation, you'll get $100,000. You don't know what you're actually going to get. You don't know. It could go up high, much higher than $100,000, assuming inflation kicks in. But you don't know, and you're only getting 0.875. So you're not making much money. You're only making $875 in income as well. So there's really no income to be had here. The only thing that you're in the tip, I love tips, don't get me wrong, but the only thing is you're banking on higher inflation than 3% relative to the zero coupon bond. But the problem here is, unlike the zero coupon bond where we're buying at significant discounts, we're not paying a premium because it's only at 94, but we're only paying a 5% discount. We don't have enough money to ladder 30-year tips because we basically have to buy them at par. I mean, look at these other guys right here. These are trading at above par. 101, 101. Why? Because the interest rate's higher. Here you got 7/8 of an interest. Here you got 2.5. Anything at 7/8 is paying below par. Anything that's above basically 2 is paying at a premium. Below par would be a discount. I hope this makes sense. But where I'm going with this is we're paying right there. In fact, when you factor in accrued interest, we're paying $115,000. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Either way, we're paying close to par value here. And so if we need 30 years of cash flow, and we need $1.5 million to generate 30 years of cash flow to keep up with any inflation above 3%. Now that's great, man. I mean, that gives you your $50,000 a year, your 5% guaranteed. But you need a lot of money to get that. A lot of money. And by the time the cash flow runs out, you're done. If you live beyond 30 years, your money's gone. On the other hand, when we did the other strategy with zeros, we only needed 1.2 million basically. That's all we needed. So we needed less. And the reason for that is because we were only using a 3% inflation, where tips will adjust for inflation. It might not even be 3%, it might be less. If it's less, you don't get as much as a value at surrender, or maturity, I should say, not surrender, maturity. Because on a tip, the principal is dictated based on inflation, all right? And as such, the principal could even go below par until maturity. Now, I don't think that there's not going to be any inflation. I mean, there's going to be some, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, you don't know what you're getting. So it's hard to stack tips as a cash flow mechanism the way you can stack zeros. Because zeros, you know for a fact what you're getting. I put in $40,000 today. I'm getting the equivalent of $50,000 of purchasing power in the future. The only thing you're doing with tips is you're putting in basically $49,500 today, and you'll get the equivalent of $50,000 purchasing power in the future. But it could be more because inflation could be higher. So tips give you the sense that, hey, I'm covered for inflation, but it costs a lot more money to get the tips to cover against inflation than zeros do. Anyway, I'll stop there. I'm probably confusing everybody. This is literally the third time I've done this video. I'm just like, I'm not quite sure I'm explaining it well, but I hope that makes sense. Tips are great if inflation is your number one concern, but it costs more money to load up on tips on the front end than it does with zeros. Because zero coupons, there is no coupon at all, and you're buying at a significant discount relative to maturity price. So for me, I'd go to zero simply because I think a 3% inflation is adequate. And by the way, we're on all these things, we're assuming a linear increase in spending, and there's just the evidence of that is non-existent. So I'm very comfortable with the zeros over the tips. With a 3% assumed inflation rate, and assuming that we're going to have a spending increase each and every year with inflation, with that 3%, that's just not going to exist. But if inflation is a bigger concern of yours, tips might be the way to go. But it costs more money on the front end. That's just fact. All right. God bless. Love your thoughts. We'll see you.